All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. And today we're going to talk about a topic that I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about, and that is whether a defamation lawsuit is a good public relations strategy. Now, there's a few things that have prompted this episode. One of them is a bogus threat of a defamation lawsuit against one of our clients, as well as us, which is kind of amusing. But also, I had another client who was considering filing a defamation lawsuit against someone who has been defaming his. Right. So let's talk a little bit about what this situation is. Right. So someone says something about you that you don't like, whether it's in an article, on a TV segment, or even on social media. What do? Most people tend to handle this situation improperly. They'll usually start by replying, and often in an emotionally unstable manner, in an attempt to kind of refute the claim, right? And look, that's understandable. If someone says something about you that you don't agree with, or you don't like that they said that, it's pretty easy to get worked up, to get emotional and say stupid things or behave in a manner that makes you look foolish. When you do that, it only ends up hurting your brand more. So what they tend to do from that point, because of course, most people aren't going to back down, right? If you push back against their criticisms, they're going to double down on their attacks against you. So what the recipient of those attacks tends to do most is they'll threaten to sue for defamation. And 99% of the time, that is a stupid choice. I had somebody who used to threaten to sue me for defamation all the time because I claimed that she seemed to have some kind of a mental illness, which in my opinion, she absolutely did. And, she kept trying to tell me, I'm going to sue you for defamation. No, can't. I mean, you can, it's not going to work. Right. So let's talk about why this is a stupid strategy. So first of all, a court case is going to cost you tons of money. And at the end of the day, the only person who really wins in a court case is the lawyers. And that's the lawyers on both sides, because they're getting paid either way, no matter how it turns out. To follow through on a defamation lawsuit, because there's a lot more to it than just having your lawyer send what you think is a scary letter saying, cease and desist, or we're going to sue you for defamation. Most people know that that's not going to do anything, right? So in order to follow through, you're looking at 30 to 50K on a lawsuit on the small side. That's a lot of money to be blowing with no guarantee of any kind of success, right? You don't know that you're going to win. In fact, what you do know is that you're most likely not going to win. So defamation is notoriously difficult to prove. We have something called the First Amendment in America. If you think someone's a terrible person, or you think someone conducts business poorly, or you think whatever it is you think about someone, or what you think about a business, you have the right to voice your thoughts, your feelings about that person or that business. Beyond that, if you're going to sue someone, you have to prove that they lied about facts, right? So if someone says that they think you're a scumbag, or they think that you're unethical, you can't prove that that's false. That's impossible to prove that that's false. Now, the burden of proof is even higher if you're a public figure. Now, this is really important because pretty much every entrepreneur today is a public figure, right? You've got a social media profile on most major platforms, right? Not just your business, but also your personal side. So if you are a public figure, and what I mean by public figure is you're someone who is prominent in your industry in some way, shape, or form, right? You may be somebody that you're producing a bunch of content about your industry. You're teaching people, you're educating people. All of these things make you a public figure. If you're cited in the media, you're a public figure. If you're, an authority in your industry, you are a public figure. So in the case of a public figure, when it comes to a defamation lawsuit, first of all, you have to prove that the statement was made with actual malice, an intent to cause harm, while knowing that it was false. Now, without an explicit admission that that person was doing that with malice and that they knew it was false, you're not going to get a win on that lawsuit. And if they have even a shred of evidence to support their claims against you, it's over. There's nothing you can do. Now, what'll happen is if you do file a lawsuit, more often than not, they will file to just have that suit dismissed. And on the grounds that you're a public figure, that's probably going to be just dismissed summarily. And then that's the end of it. And now you've wasted a bunch of money starting a lawsuit that went absolutely nowhere. Then beyond that, of course, you have to go and prove what I talked about, that it was done with malice and knowing that it was false. And like I said, without the person that you're trying to sue explicitly admitting to that in some way, you're not going to prove that. There's no way to prove that. So there was a situation a few years back where Barbara Streisand had a problem like this, and she actually tried to sue to make the problem go away. Short version of the story is she had this 2003 Malibu mansion. It was absolutely gorgeous house up on the cliffs in California. And someone had taken a picture of it and used it to show the issues with erosion that were happening in that area. And she didn't want anyone to know what her house looked like. She didn't want anyone to know where it was. So what did she do? She goes and sues them to get those photos retracted, right? And this was before, the internet was as prevalent as it was. So, it wasn't quite as all-encompassing and widespread as it is now. But even back then, the internet was a very big thing. So when she tried to sue to get these images retracted, what ended up happening was everyone started talking about it, and it drew a lot more attention, and everyone now started sharing these photos. Other articles started putting the photos in, other journalists started putting those photos in their articles. They talked about it on the news. So it created far more exposure. And that's what led to the term, the Streisand Effect, which is where when somebody tries to silence a position, an opinion, or a person, that actually ends up creating far more awareness for that thing. And so, this is something that's well known within the public relations industry. People know that when you try to silence somebody, it just makes the problem far more widespread. Now, when you sue someone, what's probably going to happen is they're going to double down and they're going to get a lot louder. They'll probably post reviews on your business profiles. They might even ask friends to do the same thing. They're probably going to start talking about it more on social media. And if they have the opportunity, they're going to talk about it in articles and on TV segments, on podcasts, things like that. So it starts to get a lot louder, a lot more quickly than most people realize. The other thing you have to think about is that all court records are public record. So every single thing disclosed in court is now documented for the world to see. So that's every statement, every piece of evidence, the judgment or the dismissal. Now, if the accused wins a judgment or dismissal, they're going to keep going even louder because now there's nothing you can do to them. And they're vindicated because they've already won something against you, which regardless of how it plays out, that's going to be perceived as they were right and you were wrong. So the other side you need to think about is the fact that court records tend to rank really well in search results, and they don't go away. They are there forever. So if you end up going to court and all this evidence goes into the court record, now when somebody searches for your name or they search for your business name or whatever the structure of that lawsuit looks like, whether it's against a person or a business or whatever, when people search for you, they're going to find those court records. They're going to show up probably on the first page for most of you, right? If you guys don't have a robust amount of media out there that shows up higher, then they're going to find these court records and they're going to draw conclusions from that you may not want them to draw conclusions on, all right? And then they're also often syndicated to other legal service platforms. And this is especially true if the person you're trying to sue knows a thing or two about SEO. There's things that they can do to make those pages rank higher. This is something we've done for clients, right? When they've had bad interactions with somebody and they've ended up having to sue them, we've leveraged SEO to make those court records rank higher and really show the world what kind of a person that person was who defrauded them in whatever way. And you're not going to displace those court records very easily. I can promise you that. And then the other side is that often random attorneys will publish articles on their own website about the case, right? So maybe there's a lawyer that specializes in defamation. They may find the case particularly interesting. Maybe there's some facet to it that appeals to them, and they can then go analyze that case, break it down, and they're doing that to showcase their expertise, right? They're analyzing the case, saying what they agree with, what they don't agree with, whatever. They might talk about how they would have handled a case like that. But in doing that, they're now drawing even more attention to your case and the court records and all of that. And often what they'll do is within those articles, they'll link to the court records, which now makes them rank even higher. So what should you do if you find yourself in a situation like this? Well, I think I've made it pretty clear that a defamation lawsuit is really not a good move in 99.9% of the cases. The first thing you have to think about is you're probably going to be criticized if you're a public figure, and people are going to say things about you that you may feel are untrue or unfair. That's just the nature of the beast. Everyone who has a prominent position, who has an audience, who's out there doing things that other people aren't doing, they're out there doing bigger things, or they're innovating in some way, you're going to get criticized. And a lot of times it's going to be by people who aren't doing what you're doing, right? They're a little bit complacent. They're not trying to go out after bigger things. They're not chasing the big, difficult goals. So you will have a lot of haters. I've always had a lot of people trolling me. I see it all the time where, I'll post something and someone's like, oh, you only got X number of views on your last video. Okay, but you got 0. Like, what is your point? So people will do that. They'll try to tear people down in many cases to make themselves feel better. The other side of this, though, is, look, you can avoid a lot of this by just not being a shitty person. Now, I know most of you guys don't have to worry about that because you're honest, ethical entrepreneurs. But the reality is, if you're not out there conning people, you're a lot less likely to be criticized. Now, let's say you did something wrong. Let's say you fucked up in some way. Maybe you promised something that you didn't deliver on, or if you unfortunately conned someone, or made a promise you couldn't keep. Whatever the situation is, you need to take accountability and make it right. If you made a promise that you didn't follow through on, well, go back, follow through on that promise, deliver whatever it was you were supposed to deliver. If you con someone out of money, pay them the fucking money back. It's not rocket science, right? You can avoid most of these issues by just being honest and ethical and transparent. And if you do something wrong, fix it. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. Is sometimes it'll start with an honest mistake, but then they don't want to admit that mistake because they're afraid of how that will affect their reputation. And then they'll ghost the person that they did wrong to. That just multiplies the problem exponentially. And then it certainly makes it look like you intentionally conned them, even if you didn't, right? There are cases where people are outright con artists and they are intentionally conning people. I talked about that with Patch Baker a while back, right? This was a guy who I exposed several years ago, was running a massive Ponzi scheme. And I exposed him at a time when everybody else insisted that this guy was just honest as the day was long. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was a great guy and delivering great returns. And I was like, look, man, I'm telling you what I see. This is what I see. The evidence doesn't align with what he's saying. And man, I heard from everyone, oh, well, do you think you're so smart that you can see something that all these other smart entrepreneurs can't see? Well, yes, I did. So I was several years early to identifying his particular con. I did end up exposing him for it. And just about, I think it was last year sometime, he was actually indicted by the FBI, SEC, I think it was, for like a $14 million Ponzi scheme. The reality was the actual total amount was even bigger than that. But, it just goes to show that there are some actual scumbags out there, and 99% of the time they eventually get caught in a big way, especially when the government entities, all these 3-letter agencies, FBI, DOJ, SEC, etc., Once they start getting their fingers into the situation, then it's pretty much all over at that point. But bottom line, if you've done something wrong, fix it, take accountability and fix it. And that will eliminate most of your problems with people criticizing you online. You're still going to have the small haters and trolls who are just criticizing you just to criticize you. But if you've done something wrong and you fix it, that's going to go a really long way in avoiding this kind of situation in the first place. In fact, it could actually help your reputation because, look, if you do that, you've now done something that most people don't do. When most people do something wrong, they just shut down, they back away, they ghost people, and they try to avoid the problem. If you do the opposite of that and actually fix the problem, most of these people will actually come back onto your side. They may not do business with you again, but they will talk about how, this thing went wrong. They stepped up, they did the right thing, they fixed it. If you're doing business in an unethical way, if you're conning people, if you're ripping people off, man, the only solution there is give the people their money back and just start operating your business ethically. And, yes, I am talking to a particular person in this case. She knows exactly who I'm talking to. But a defamation lawsuit across the board is a stupid idea. Avoid it by doing the right thing. You don't have to worry about trying to threaten people to sue them when you do the right thing. That's what most people don't do. And that's what ends up putting them into a bad situation. So it's always better to just get out there, do the right thing, publicize the good things that you're doing. And if something does go wrong, which happens often in business, fix it, make it right, move on. It's as simple as that. But don't waste your time on a defamation lawsuit. You're not going to get anywhere with it, especially if you're dealing with someone prominent because they are a public figure. Or you are a public figure rather. And the bar for winning that is next to impossible. So that being said, we're going to roll to Jeremy's PR PSA for today. And that is that trying to silence critics will only amplify their claims, causing even more damage to your brand, which can be difficult to recover from. Look, the reality is when your brand has become damaged, there's long-term implications for that. We live in an internet world where everything exists forever at this point. So if something is out there about you negative, future people who are considering doing business with you, whether as a client or as some kind of a partner or collaborating in some way, they're going to look you up online. And if they're finding bad things out about you, it's going to hurt your future opportunities. It's going to hurt your revenue and it's going to hurt your impact in the world. So, like I said, a defamation lawsuit is an absolutely stupid idea. What you want to do is actually conduct your business in an honest and ethical way, which I know most of you guys do. And then if something does go wrong, look, step up, take accountability, do the right thing, and fix the problem. That will put you ahead of probably 95% of the entrepreneurs out there because most people, like I said, they just run away from that, and that makes the problem worse. So don't do that. Fix the problem, be accountable, and your life will be a lot better. All right, guys, that's going to be a wrap for today. Hope you guys found a lot of value in that. If you did, I'd love it if you'd share this with someone. Drop a link in the comments. This will be up on YouTube. We'll be adding the rest of the description and links and all that stuff here like usual. Love it if you drop a comment while you're there. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button while you're there as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. And that is a wrap for today. See you next week.